Now this section is about manufacturing your own original designs or designs that you have permission to manufacture. So in other words, if you've come up with an original design or pattern and you want to make those in quantities so that you can sell them, either retail or wholesale, if it's your design, you have absolutely every right to do that. If it's somebody else's pattern or someone else's design, it is only proper etiquette and good business ethics, not to mention legally proper, to ask for in writing permission from that designer. So in other words, occasionally, once or twice a year, I do hear from a customer who says, gee, I really like your pattern XYZ, and I'm wondering if you would give me permission to make several of them to sell at my local craft show or at a church bazaar or whatever it might be. I always give them permission, but I also always appreciate that they've asked for my permission. Other pattern designers do not give permission. And if they say no, move on. Don't aggravate yourself with wanting to do something that you don't have the right to do. Now, when you choose a product to manufacture, gee, do you choose a product that you just happen to like? Do you choose a product that a bunch of your friends have agreed that would be a good idea? Gee, it's really kind of difficult to get started, and I remember the first things I manufactured and sold at craft fairs are a far cry from what I have now. But I'll tell you how I did it. I started out with craft fairs. Craft fairs are very easy to get into and they're very inexpensive. Generally, you just pay for your table space. You have a little table at some building or a specific location where they're having this craft fair. They bring people through and they come and either purchase or don't purchase your items. This is a great way to test market. And I remember in the beginning I had several products and they weren't even related to each other, which I don't think is such a good idea. I think your items should be related, but at that time I didn't know any better. But you put them out there, and I learned a lot. The first 2 years I was doing that. I learned what sold and what didn't. I learned what I had, where I could make some really good money and where I was just spinning my wheels. And I also learned that people will copy you. So once you put your item out there, they'll copy you. And I can remember I had one small item. It was really easy for me to make. It was a cute children's item. And I sold tons of these the first year I was out there. And I did all my research. I got the best prices on the raw materials, and it was a cute little item, but it wasn't anything really complicated. Well, I came back the next year to do some of the same craft shows I was going to, that I had done the year before, only to find there was 2 or 3 retired ladies who had decided to make that item too. So they either bought one from me or maybe not and just copied it, and they came back the next year and there they were in competition with me. So that watered down my sales, but not only were they in competition with me, they were selling that below cost. And so I learned you don't get angry about these things, you just learn from them. So at one point I went up to one of these ladies and I said, I can't understand how you're selling this so inexpensively. I priced everything out and I can't make it for that. And she looked at me with a very sweet smile and said, oh, I'm retired and I just needed something to do. I don't really need to make money. Well, I was a young mother at the time and I did need to make money. So I had to step up my game, and that's what that caused me to do. I can't make an item that could easily be copied by a little retired lady who just wants something to do. I had to come up with a far more original and specific product, which I did do. And but that's just my point as far as testing the market. So you can test the market and learn what sells, and sometimes you learn what colors sell. You know, maybe your favorite color is green, but you can't sell that particular jacket in green to save your life. So don't put all your money into green fabric just because you like it. Get out there, test it, do some sampling, keep notes, keep an eye on it. Don't just as your imagination say, oh wow, I sold 2 of those in blue today, so I'm gonna go buy a bolt of blue fabric because everybody loves it in blue, and only to find out I never sold another blue one as long as I lived. And now I got a bolt of fabric I don't know what to do with. And trust me, that happened to me as well. So I learned to be far more meticulous with understanding the ratio of colors or fabrications or sizes that sold. And that test marketing can do that for you. So you could test market like I did at craft fairs, art fairs, or you could test market online. You could test market with your friends, but they're not always going to be honest. They're going to tell you they love it because they love you, not because they necessarily love the item. So they're not always your best test market. The general public of somebody you don't even know and you've never met is going to be your best test market. So once you've tested your market, you want to get your products honed down. You don't want to have 50 different items in your line, particularly starting out. You want to keep it to a small, manageable amount. Why? Well, because you're going to have to keep all the inventory to produce these different items. So let's say you had a handbag, a coat, and a craft item. Well, I've got to make sure I've got all the hardware and the zippers and the outer fabrics in stock for the handbags. Now I got a coat. I've got to make sure I've got buttons and interfacing and linings and the proper wool fabrics. So you're chasing around after all this inventory. So try to keep everything into, if you're going to sell coats, maybe 3 different styles. If you're going to sell handbags, just sell handbags, maybe some wallets and some other things. And this is just an example. So try to stay into one genre that works best for you, your work, your aesthetic. And then as you test market, you're going to find places where your items sell better than others. It just depends on the item. And none of us really have the clairvoyant foresight to know exactly the best place to sell, say, a handbag. Is it going to sell better on an Etsy store online, or is it going to sell better at my local craft bazaar? I don't know, so I have to test it. So you'll put a little effort in, especially the first year, so that you can hone down where is it selling best, what colors sell best, which items sell best. I had dropped things from my line that were my favorite. I loved them. I loved making them. I thought they were the best thing I ever made, but the public wasn't buying it. So I can't just keep trying to force that. I have to learn that I've got to drop that. As much as I loved it, it's got to go, and I've got to sell to the customer what they want and where they want it. So we'll hone down where we're going to sell it, and then we're going to learn, and through that process, you're probably going to learn that a craft fair, a fine art fair, and an online sales are entirely different. Now, in my day, we didn't have online. When I was first beginning, we only had the craft fairs and the fine art fairs, and I found out right away that what I could sell at a fine art fair, I couldn't sell at a craft fair, and vice versa. Craft fairs are generally set up with very crafty items, very easy to make, very simple and low price points. And when you're manufacturing some things, particularly if you're doing it in your own home or basement, you don't want to nickel and dime yourself. You don't want to be selling an item that's $5 or $6. Imagine how many you have to sell to make that day's at that craft fair worth your time. Unless you're the lady who's retired and doesn't need to make money, then it doesn't matter. And you probably wouldn't be taking this class anyway. So what we are going to learn is where our items fit in best, what's our best price point when we do all this test marketing, and eventually you'll hone this down, and if you get to the point that I did where I hit a ceiling of how many I could sell because I'm only one person and I can only sew so many hours a day, and now I could possibly sell dozens more a week, but I can't possibly make those. So now what do? Well, I decided to do some investigating, and you'll need to do that too, on how to hire subcontractors. I didn't want to hire an employee. And the reason you don't want to hire an employee is because now you're going to be responsible for taxes, workman's comp insurance, and any number of other things that are going to bring your profit margin down. And you're really probably not ready for that. Having an employee that you have to guarantee so many hours, and maybe you have to contribute to an insurance plan, maybe you have to contribute to a 401k, and things that you might not be ready for. So I chose subcontractors. But this is where you need to do your investigation. Depending on the state and county that you live in, there are specific laws for subcontracting. There are also federal laws when it comes to income tax. So you want to investigate those. But basically, I'll tell you what the basics are. But again, please do your own investigating. The basics are to hire a subcontractor. They cannot work under in your facility under your guidelines of time. So in other words, I couldn't hire someone and say, you have to come to my studio and work from 9 to 5, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. I can hire them to work in their own facility, and I can say to them, I need this work done by next Friday. But I can't tell them they have to go home and they have to work from 9 to 5 on certain days of the week or any days of the week. I can only give them the product and say, I need these made, and this is when I need them back. Now, when I started hiring these subcontractors, they were basically women that I knew sewed or were in my sewing guilds. And so they had never subcontracted either, and they didn't necessarily have the information they needed to be successful at subcontracting. So I helped them with understanding the subcontracting, because here's the thing. They're going to be responsible at the end of the year to pay their own income tax. You're not withholding it at all, because you don't want that aggravation. You're not ready for that kind of commitment to an employee. So to make sure they understand that somewhere after the first of the year, they're going to receive from your bookkeeper or accountant what's called a 1099. And on that 1099, it says, I, Janet Prey, paid Susie Smith $8,752 last year. Now Susie Smith is required to put that into her annual income or her family's income and pay the appropriate taxes on it. You don't want to do that to somebody that isn't prepared for it. I would always tell my employees, look, just put away about 1/3 of the money that you take from me. Just start a little savings account, put it in there, don't touch it. When the taxes come due, you may not owe all of it, but at least if you do, or you owe part of it, it won't be painful to pay it because you already have that set aside. The other thing that you can help them understand is they have a lot of deductions against that income. They can deduct their mileage coming to and from your facility. They can deduct their cost of their equipment, the upkeep on their equipment, and even a portion of their household expenses according to how much space they use in their home to sew. So let's say they use 5% of the space of their square footage of their home to sew in. Now 5% of many of their household expenses like light and heat and other overheads can be deducted, and therefore they're not paying as high a taxes. So help them out, make sure they get their ducks in a row and understand the laws before you hire them that way. But it worked out extremely well for me. I was able to cut and bundle everything. Earlier in the course we talked about cutting and bundling, and then I would have them come in on a Tuesday, and I'd say, okay, in 10 days, how many can you do in 10 days? They would make the commitment. And they would know that if they could not meet that commitment, they should let me know far in advance, because I was about to go to an art fair and sell these items, and if I don't have them, I can't sell them. It's direct sales. So if they call me on Friday when they're supposed to be delivering 2 dozen and say, you know, I didn't get to that this week, I'm probably going to be pretty upset. So make sure they understand that commitment means a lot to you. Okay, now we'll talk about pricing your item and selling wholesale. So when you go to price your item, how do you decide how much you're going to charge for an item? Well, first of all, when I decide I'm going to make an item and I'm going to sell it, I get out my pad and paper and I figure out what is the cost of all the raw materials that are going to go into this project. Then I have to determine how long will it take me to make that project. And then I multiply that by what I think is a reasonable wage for today's time. Now, back when I was doing it, a reasonable wage was $10 to $12 an hour. Now it's probably close to double that, but you have to make that decision. And you also, because you've learned the Islander techniques, you've cut your time down too. So that will help you also in keeping your prices within an affordable range that you can actually sell the item easily and readily. So I'll take all of that data, the raw materials, plus the time of labor, and if I'm going to sell at retail, I multiply that times 4. So if it's going to cost me $50 in labor and raw materials, I'm going to sell it for $200. Why? You might have thought, oh, well, if it's going to cost me $50, I'll sell it for $100. Not if you're going to be the manufacturer and you're going to be the retailer too. You're wearing 2 hats and you're also skipping the wholesaler. And someday you may want to wholesale this item. And if you don't have a high enough price point on it, let's say it's $200, now I'm at an art fair, and this happened to me on a regular basis, a boutique would come up to me and say, you know, we'd really like to carry your items in our boutique. They see a $200 price tag on it, they want to buy it for $100 because they're going to sell it for $200. So I have to be able to have a wholesale price. So when you're starting out and you think that there's any opportunity that you're going to go into wholesale, you want to take that into consideration and not lowball your price just because you want to sell it. And let me tell you another reason you don't want to lowball your price. Quick story. I was selling wool Melton capes at outdoor fine art fairs and Renaissance festivals. And I think I had a price of $65 on these capes. And I would see people coming into my shop, and when you're selling to the public, you can identify those people that have the wherewithal to purchase your item. Now I knew this exact style of cape was selling at Saks Fifth Avenue for $300. And when I would see a wealthier woman come into my shop, I'd say, oh, well, she's going to try. And she tries the cape on. I figure this is a done sale. She knows it's worth $300 and it's only $65. She's going to say, wow, what a great bargain. She put it back on the hanger every time and walked out. And I wondered to myself, what in the world? Why didn't she get that? Well, one thing I learned really quick was that the general buying public determines value by the price. She doesn't understand that this is wool Melton and that the one at Saks was wool Melton, but she knows the one at Saks was $300, and so she knew she had a $300 cape. If she bought mine, she'd think, oh, well, that's just a $65 cape, even though they were the same item pretty much. So I learned that that was very important. So eventually, I read an article a following week about a woman who doubled her prices and increased her sales for the very same reason. The public wasn't appreciating the quality that she was selling because the price was too low. So I doubled my prices and indeed increased my sales. So don't lowball your price. Now, when you want to manufacture an item, you want to be able to purchase the raw materials at the lowest price point, again, so that you have the highest profit margin. Now, how do you buy wholesale? Well, it's pretty easy today. Back in the day when I did it, let me tell you, it wasn't. You had to guarantee a certain amount of purchases per year. You had to purchase as much as 5 or 6 bolts at a time. You had to spend $1,000 in your first order. Some of those things were quite prohibitive for people starting in business, and actually it was for me the first year. So we were purchasing from local fabric stores on the big sale days, and rummaging through and finding the best bargains. And It worked really well in the beginning, but once we were able to get ourselves up to wholesale, it's just a whole lot easier because it's just a phone call, you place an order, the stuff is delivered at your door instead of running all over town. And when you buy wholesale, you can buy fabrics that aren't readily available to the public. So it doesn't, it looks more like a manufactured item as opposed to, oh, I saw that fabric at the store myself, I could have made it myself. You don't want that particular appearance to your item. So keep that in mind as well. There's a few terms I want you to know about. Okay, so when you go to a wholesale show to buy fabric, and they have them in almost every state, you'll find at least one local, and then there are nationals. And I will have some information in the workbook for you about some of those that you can look into. And some of them actually, there's a really great group now that specializes in small manufacturers. So you can actually go in and buy one bolt at a time. You could actually even buy sometimes only 5 or 10 yards at a time, which you can't do at the big wholesale shows. So that would be a good place. We didn't have those back when I was getting started, but it's really nice that they have them now. They're really encouraging small manufacturers in the United States to get out there and go into business, and they're going to be your partner and help you out. There will be something called factoring oftentimes, and that's just credit. So in the fabric business, the term factoring just translates over to credit. And generally your first order, they're going to want you to pay cash up front, and then you'll develop a relationship, and after that they'll do 30 to 60 days. The factoring always helps out because if you can get 60 days, oftentimes you can get the fabric in, manufacture the item, sell it, get paid for it before you have to pay for the goods. That's called other people's money, working with other people's money. And any business expert will tell you that's the best way to operate a business. So once you get yourself up to that point, you'll be doing even better with your profit margins. So working with other people's money is a really, really good thing. Now we come to the subject of branding. And branding can be an elusive term. So try to spend some time investigating and possibly taking a class or a course on what branding is as it relates to marketing. You know, there's different schools of thought, and what works for one person might not work for the other, but what's the standard and the constant in all branding is to create an image that is on every product that you make. So when you've created your logo, or the title of your company might be your logo, make sure that that is shown in the exact same way or very similar. You may have some migrations of your logo over the years, but you want to always brand with that logo. You may also want to brand with a color. There may be a specific color. You don't want to be all over the place because you want people, you want people to recognize your brand. So think about the brands that you recognize. The next time you're watching TV or flipping through a magazine or see billboards on the highway, oftentimes from a distance, you can immediately recognize what that brand is. Exxon, McDonald's, there's so many, Coca-Cola. It's real obvious. You don't have to be there. You can be down the aisle and you can see where the Coca-Cola is because it's the red can with the white printing on it, and their logo is so distinctive. You won't be competing with brands that large, but you still want to use the information that they've learned to make their products successful, you can use to make your product successful. So create a label that you can put in all of your products and use your logo on your business cards and any handout, any collateral, any ad, your social media aspect, any place that you are doing any type of business, use your branding. Now I have some examples here of the way I've branded my products. Now a couple of them are a little bit older, so the logo is slightly different. Don't change your logo right away off the bat every year or anything like that. And if you do change your logo or your color, make a transition slowly. But there are so much information out there on branding. I'm not the consummate expert, so I definitely suggest that you go to Amazon and look up books on branding or take a course in it. Find some support in learning how to brand and continue to reinforce your brand. And pretty soon people will recognize your things. And that's when you start to create a following. So that's it for branding. But I just want to quickly go back over this course. So in this portion of the course, we're going to learn about test marketing. Test market by direct sales. You can do anything from a home party to an art fair, craft fair. An online Etsy store is a great place to get started. Now, there are lots of other online stores. I'm not just saying Etsy. Some of them take a larger percentage of your sale. Some of them are easier to manipulate as far as the software to put your products up there. So do some investigating, figure out which one's going to fit your particular product best. Remember, if you're going to hire employees, consider the subcontract information, but make sure you discover what the laws are, the current laws. And again, laws are constantly changing, so make sure you're up to date with that information. Make sure that your pricing is up there high enough. Now, one thing I didn't touch on before, and I get this question often. They say, well, what if after I do that calculation and I multiply times 4, the item won't sell for that price? There's a very simple answer to that. Move on. You don't want to make an item that won't sell for a nice profit margin. If you can sell an item that you have a $5 profit margin on, and you can sell an item that you have a $50 profit margin on, which one do you want? Obviously, the higher, so always strive for that. I oftentimes would test market an item that I wanted to make, and I would put it out there at that 4 times formula that I talked about. And if it did not sell, I didn't make any more. So I made 1 or 2 or 3, that's all. And then I'd have to discount it maybe to get rid of it because it wasn't selling. Maybe it didn't fit in my line. Maybe it didn't appeal to the customer as much as it did me. Or maybe it was just too high a price for what it was, but that was the price I needed to get. So don't sell items that you have to discount. Make sure you get your full price for it. Now, one last thing about pricing. When I gave you that formula of 4 times your cost of raw materials plus labor, I would say one more thing. Either the 4 times or whatever the market will bear. There were plenty of items that I found that the market would bear many times more. There was one item I got 7 times. And it was just because the market would bear it. So don't undersell it and don't just stick to that 4 times. Just don't sell it. Don't go with a product that you can't at least get that 4 times. That's my advice anyway. That wraps up our discussion on manufacturing. Be sure to post your questions on the discussion board. I want to be there for you and I want to help you be successful at manufacturing.